Hi, welcome. Today I have a very special guest. So for those who don't know, it's Matt, who is actually a very early investor behind Proto Labs, Xometry, basically back in 2008 and 2015. So true OG of manufacturing industry, as I like to refer to you, of course. And yeah, Matt now invests in a lot of the what I think we should call bedrock manufacturers based in the United States, and helps those companies to solve not only just manufacturing problems, but basically turn those problems into opportunities. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you. I think we've known each other for quite a while now, about 4 or 5 years. So it's great. This is, I believe, my first podcast. So, I'm excited.
Very cool. Very cool. So, I get both Twitter and LinkedIn now flooded with posts about how bad things are in manufacturing in the US. So, but I really like to focus on the not even the positive side, but basically opportunities, right? So, what opportunities actually now we can identify in manufacturing and in specifically in US, because obviously in US there is sort of the framework that didn't allow you to basically go and compete with high volume, low cost manufacturing that usually made China and other countries. So what's basically the alternative? What's the opportunities in US for the shops that you think is basically an answer for this, for those challenges? So what's the answer from your perspective?
Well, I think people need to stop whining about it. And the way I would spell whining is not WHING or WHINING. There's that education at work. It's WHY dash NG, right? Why don't we have more factories in America like we do in China? Why don't we have this? Why don't we have this? Well, a big reason we don't have them is because you're spending all your time, asking these questions instead of getting off your seat and doing it. Like Larry Lucas felt the exact same frustration about injection molding throughout the better part of the 90s when he was building his, prior company before he started Proto Labs. And his reaction was to hunker down in a garage for several years with a small team and build some revolutionary technology for injection molding. And so I think we need to stop the whining. And I don't mean like in like the toddler sense, although some of it does sound a little bit like toddlers. It means like stop asking why and start just doing, like get off your seat and start building. I think there's way too much hand wringing and not enough hand tools being put to work.
Completely agree. And this is something that I also see across some of the young engineers that basically want to, well, I should say like start anything in the garage, start any machine shop or something like that, but just start, right? So not just like basically, constantly posting something on X or Twitter or whatever, as you're saying, like just complaining about everything, but just start and learn through the work. Basically, that's the only way to me. So that's cool. So again, let's look at this from the investor perspective, because again, you had a chance to invest in very cool companies very early. Again, identify some of those opportunities. So now in 2024, so what types of the investments specifically you look to, to fund? What types of the company you look to fund? And what kind of the business and business models maybe specifically you're looking to, what excites you, right?
Just a broad waterfront of American manufacturing. It's the entire thesis of our fund. I think 80% of our fund one will be entirely in digital manufacturing startups, pure play manufacturing startups. Probably 9 companies that are pure play manufacturing startups. A little bit of background. So I spent about 20 years in private equity before I became a full-time seed investor. Pre-seed investor, I guess, is the word today. Although I don't even know what that means anymore. I was a partner at a firm in Boston called Northbridge and a firm in San Francisco called Vector Capital. I got very lucky and sort of found a company hiding out in the middle of Minnesota in 2007 called the Protomold Company before it was even Proto Labs. And, think about an injection molding company started by a small team of software engineers and machinists. Beautiful financials, absolutely beautiful financials, just jumped off the page, like very high gross margins, very high profit margins without sacrificing a very rapid growth rate. And, so foundationally, what we look for are startups that, can achieve similar margin profiles. We're greedy. There's lots of ways to make money in manufacturing at low margins. I think we want to cherry pick the places where we can make money with high margins. But foundationally, we take a broader view. I think there's like a lot of folks who are just really thinking hard about like sheet metal or CNC or tool and die. We kind of take a much broader view around manufacturing in America, and we focus a lot more on segments where foundationally you have really, really, really long lead times, where you have the most painful workflows, and where you have analog and slow supply chains. And, we are most of our manufacturing projects are incubations. Most of them are companies where, we will spend 6 months to a year, like highly immersed in like a handful of segments of American manufacturing. That means always have the safety goggles in the briefcase, right?
Sure.
You never know when you're going to need them. But we generally get really, really deep. And if we get conviction around a market, then we look for teams that we can build conviction in that market. And oftentimes they are, think about, we like to pair a brilliant mechanical, electrical, chemical engineer, chemist, or material scientist with like a brilliant software engineer, and ideally at least one brilliant kind of specialist in that field who can bring the perspective of the technician to bear very early. In the case of Protolabs, it was bringing the perspective of the machinist. The machinists were paired at Protolabs very early with brilliant computer scientists to like design a lot of the core software automation. So we follow that very similar, called the very early Protolabs playbook in our companies. And so we're just covering a much broader waterfront. And we prioritize segments of manufacturing where there's like lack of foundational software layers.
Right. So interesting point that you mentioned that, again, it's nothing new, but I think this is very applicable in manufacturing. Specifically, you want to find the teams that have at least two of those components, right? So the engineering side, and maybe software side, and maybe business side, like ideally three, I guess, like maybe 2-3 co-founders. That's kind of ideal recipe for not success. We don't know, obviously, because it's all like, venture. But at the same time, what you're trying to find is basically this mix of the expertise, among the team members or the foundational team, I guess. And that's something that probably gives you some higher than average hopes that, okay, so maybe those guys can actually, with the right technology, with the right innovation and stuff like that, can actually nail it out. Is it how you look at that?
A little bit differently. We foundationally look for engineers who want to build a great business, right? Okay. Not like peddle memes, but build a foundationally great business. And so we're not very active on social media, sort of by design. We have a burner Twitter account we use for founder due diligence, but generally we are founders who spend a lot of time in manufacturing on social media concern us, because if you do the math, if someone's spending a half an hour to an hour a day on social media over the lifetime of a 10-year investment partnership with that founder, it means that they're going to spend 250 to 500 days of that partnership not thinking about their factory, but thinking about whatever they're posting. So whatever they're posting better be bringing in like a hell of a lot of business to like justify that time spent thinking about the factory. So fundamentally, we look for founders who first and foremost really want to architect and build great businesses. And the types of businesses you can build in manufacturing and the moats that you can build in manufacturing starting at an early stage are much more powerful than the moats in software. Like most software companies have, I would describe it as barbs in the fish hook, but not necessarily true moats. And the worst thing about software is you kind of got to show your work to everybody. right? Everybody has to see your work. Like, think about your own workflows, right? At Digifaster, right? Like, one of your competitors can go to like one of your customers and say, okay, well, here's the workflows that Digifaster is building. Gosh, what should we plagiarize? Whereas in manufacturing, the parts and the products our companies ship, like nobody can reverse engineer what was done to produce them. They're just really happy with the quality, the speed, and especially the price.
Right, right. Totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. Okay. So for those companies, so how we think about basically hiring the talents, right? So how, I mean, especially for the not even the founder team, but basically for this initial team of people that, again, you still need to have this balance because, again, you don't have unlimited money, obviously, but you still need to hire some talent. So how you think about it? Because, again, like manufacturing isn't sexy for some reason, and maybe it's changing. I hope it's really changing, and probably it's changing. But still, like how you thinking about those talents now?
It's like a mindset as much of it is as it is like brilliance, right? We are looking for like a mindset of like laser obsessive focus, And, we don't care that much about fancy degrees. Fancy degrees are great. We have a few PhDs on our team. We have, an MIT PhD. We have a UT PhD. We have some great PhDs on our team. And that's a great credential. I think the degree that we value above all else is the degree that was coined by the longtime chairman of Bear Stearns, Ace Greenberg, when he said, Bear Stearns, we don't look to hire MBAs. We have to hire PSDs. And what PSD stood for is somebody who's poor and smart with a deep desire to become rich. And PSD degrees for us are the most valuable degrees that we see in the founders we look for.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So do you see like those people, more people within the US or some people abroad that basically, moving to US to basically find this American dream and, basically what you just said, like they become rich at some point, maybe, but they hungry. They definitely super hungry. So is it like
we want to back founders who see exactly what we see, which is that there are opportunities to build generational wealth in manufacturing that are unlike anywhere else.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay. That's awesome. Yeah, so some maybe slightly not even side question, but at the same time maybe slightly towards the direction of the machining. So again, I know that you're like look at the market more broadly, of course, not only just machining. Of course, I'm from the machining side mostly, and to me it becomes not even this, but I think it's something that just naturally happen because again, like in manufacturing, specifically in machining, so everything takes just longer, much longer than in any other industry, to my experience. And specifically, it looks like that partially the mission of the companies on the top of the market, their mission is basically educate their customers, educate people from the machining space on a lot of the direction. Because again, like in machining, obviously there are a lot of the perfect, great people that do machining, to the top level, absolute top level. But at the same time, those people need to, adopt new processes, adopt new automation, the software and everything. And when I'm thinking about them, and I'm thinking about my company as well, I'm thinking this through the lens of I'm actually just have to help them and educate them on how they can actually be more efficient and more productive, because that's the name of the game now. I think it's the name of the game now, productivity and just efficiency, because you just can't go and hire like a bunch of people to your shop. You just don't have enough funding, enough money for doing that. But you can be more efficient. Your team, your people can be more efficient, 100%. And you just have to be competitive, just overall run scalable business. So are you looking at that from the same perspective?
I think slightly similar. We believe that those tools are most powerful when they're built from the ground up and vertically integrated into the manufacturing process from day zero, right? So I think there's like a burgeoning world of technology investment in manufacturing that's focused on creating the next generation of software tools for the long tail of American manufacturing. And, I think that's an interesting place to invest in, we generally avoid that because, I think you and I have talked about this on a hike before. Like in your business, you have one of the toughest competitors in the world, right? And that world is a boat. You have to compete against a new boat for the owner, right? Think about whatever the ACV is of DigiFabster and a 15 million revenue machine shop in Ohio that nets the owner $3 million a year. The cost of your software is the same cost as a new boat for that owner. And you better be better. You got to be a lot better than that boat, not just better than, the next quoting tool. You got to be better than that freaking boat that owner is going to take with his family on, Lake Michigan over the summer at their summer place in northern Michigan. Right. And I've been on these boats. My LPs own these boats. Right. You got to be better than that boat. So we believe in building these tools from the ground up inside. And the only way you see them are through the customer experiences that you have in our companies.
Yeah, I'm partially see the same, maybe on a smaller scale, talking about vertical integration of the everything for the shops, because it looks like the shops starting to realize that, yes, they can use some software like DigiFabster, like again, ERP system and everything, but sometimes they realize that some of the software is basically overkill for them, for their size, for their process and everything, and they're starting to think, okay, so how can I actually build something from scratch, even though they have obviously no background in software, but again, they're starting to think, so what software I can actually, or maybe APIs, what can I connect to basically assemble my ideal workflow software specifically for my machine shop, right? So even though, again, they can't do this in a fashion as the vertical integrated company, like build everything from scratch, but they're thinking from that. And again, that's something that amazed me because I didn't see anything like that 5-6 years ago at all. So no one even know what is it APIs and things like that. Now people definitely know. Now people really want to assemble those things for their shop. And that's beautiful. That's beautiful change. Of course, it's not fit for everyone. Sometimes out of the box solution is the best, of course. But again, this change that I see, across multiple shops now, and it's perfect, I think. So just wondering if we can get to the point with specifically machine shops and manufacturers where not most of them, but the most successful ones will be really vertically integrated, maybe use again some software like DigiFabster via API or stuff like that, like basically assembling this workflow, specifically for their shop. So I really envision this future and think it's good. It's rather good. So
I love what you're doing. I love what Paperless Parts is doing. I love how there's been this big unbundling of the Protolabs stack over the years, right? If you think about the full stack that Protolabs built from the quoting to the ERP, from the front end to the back end, we're seeing an unbundling of that over the last 5 to 10 years, and selling into the longer tail of American manufacturing. I think it's great. I want all these companies to get better, and then I want to compete against them even harder, right? And so the two worlds very much coexist quite nicely. I think there's a world of vertical integration where you are assembling a best in breed stack of outside tools. There's a world of vertical integration where you build the tools in house from the ground up. Personally, I prefer the latter. It takes longer. It's a little harder. It costs more money. But it's a lot more fun, and you can get a lot more done with a smaller team, in my opinion, in that world, if you're willing to be flexible on time.
Yeah, for sure. Completely agree. So slightly switching the topics, something that I was thinking about a lot, and again, I have my kind of point of view on that, and I don't know, either you agree with that or not. So when we're thinking about manufacturing, and again, this is the field where in some countries, okay, for example, in China, it's a lot of incentives and stuff like that, that government basically help manufacturing to rise. I'm not necessarily think that it could be, it's even the best approach where you need someone as large as the government to be involved in the sector. I always like thinking about that, usually entrepreneurs can actually figure out everything themselves without any help from pretty much anyone. As large as a government, for example. So, but in the sector like manufacturing, where there's some of the things that material prices and stuff like that, that's really hard to change. So it is what it is. Or for example, cost of living. You kind of have to factor this into your business and everything. Yet still, you need to find out the way how to actually do your business in the most efficient way, even though you have those circumstances that you're living in a very expensive country. So, but overall, do you think we need in manufacture, broadly speaking, in manufacturing, do we need any incentive from the government? Do we need like some specific manufacturing friendly zones or tax like relief stuff or something like that? Or really it's just entrepreneurs just need to figure this out themselves?
I think everyone knows how China puts the thumb on the scales of its manufacturing industry. Like that's not going away. I do think I think it's good to see that there's a reawakening, that when we lost much of our industrial base, we lost a lot of civics, lost a lot of communities. Like one of our LPs, is a multi-billion-dollar family-owned chemicals business. They have a giant plant in central Tennessee. The last time the town opened a new school was when they brought the plant into that town. Right. So, the civics of what I would just call industrial civics, right, matter a lot. These are great jobs. These are jobs that you can work with pride for decades. So I do think there's an important role for government to play. I think it's important that government doesn't make the mistake that venture capital did in manufacturing for many decades and let most of that money get captured by the grifters. Like think about the 3D printing industry in America, right? Like how many billions of dollars of venture capital have been vaporized in 3D printing. It's like a joke we tell at Praxis, what's the most valuable thing the 3D printing industry has made?
So what?
What's the most valuable thing the 3D printing industry has made? Take a guess.
Most valuable thing, right? I don't know, maybe the name, just the 3D printing as a name, no?
No, summer homes for investment bankers who took them public respect to them. The most valuable thing the industry has made. Let's be real, right? So, historically, venture capital, we call this the venture capital paradox in manufacturing. Okay. We were talking about this at our annual meeting a few weeks ago. Let me pull up this slide here, because you had this you had the same two headlines, one in Forbes and one in the Wall Street Journal. I just have it behind me here on my screen, right? You can't really see it. But in Forbes, you had a headline that said, why are manufacturing startups so hard to fund? And in the Wall Street Journal, you had a headline that said, venture capitalists are pouring billions of dollars into 3D printing startups. Here's why, right? So, I think it's imperative that we focus on fundamentals, right?
Yeah.
And that any big surge of investment in American manufacturing be geared first and foremost to building really strong businesses that scale, not weak businesses that scale, but strong businesses that scale.
Yeah, that's probably something that I mean behind the name of 3D printing, because 3D printing itself, additive manufacturing, is the just exciting initiative for investor and something that can raise the money. But when it comes to building actual business behind it, that's a different story. And it looks like in 3D printing, for most of the companies, wasn't the case. Like it's really hard to, and I only know the most successful 3D printing companies are those who who basically printing the parts in tens of thousands and millions. So basically prototyping companies. That's what they are. Not those who actually building some new printer, like thousands, like the new thousands of the printers, or right. Even no new 3D printing technology. It's those who basically just solving the existing problem, like prototyping, right? That's it. That's just a real business with real margins and everything.
I think there's also a foundational problem with the way that most early stage VCs see a manufacturing startup, in the sense that, if you think about like a software startup, you very much are judging its success or failure against what you see from the P&L, right? It's a P&L business. Gross margins are, in most cases, inherently high. And so fundamentally get very obsessed when you kind of leave that pre-seed stage and start going through what today is called the seed stage, meaning the early go-to-market stage. You become very obsessed with what are the economics of my go-to-market, because I'm investing all this money in customer acquisition, all this money in sales and marketing. What's the payback period against that, right? Like, how good is that? Does that justify, significant venture capital investment for scale up? Manufacturing is a different model, right? When you talk to really smart manufacturing owners, like they look at their P&L, but what they obsess about above all else is the return on invested capital, the ROIC of their businesses. These are ROIC businesses more than they are pure P&L businesses alone. The P&L matters in as much as it sort of, it can provide a measure of what your ROIC is. But, EBITDA is kind of a meaningless metric for a manufacturing business, revenue even more so. I shouldn't say not meaningless, but, thinking about a startup in manufacturing asking for a valuation purely based on its revenue multiple without understanding anything else behind those economics, in my opinion, is just, mind blowing. So I think there's at some levels, there's like a foundational misperception about what like an exceptional early stage manufacturing business looks like versus an exceptional software startup.
Is it possible that because most of the software companies, SaaS companies, just use the wrong playbook from the VCs and, just focus on the wrong stuff like valuation and multipliers and everything, not thinking about customer acquisition cost?
Oh, no, that's the right playbook. I mean, I think the right playbook for a software startup that has clear product market fit should be a scale so fast you take everyone's breath away and put all your competitors out of business. I feel the same way about a manufacturing startup too.
Okay. But at the same time, those people in manufacturing, they really look deeper into that and thinking about the margins as the most important thing, I guess.
Well, if you take a software business, right? Let's say, you build DigiFaster to 500 million in revenue and, and you're not making any money. Guess what? A new owner of that business or a private equity firm could probably cut 50% of your headcount, just like Elon Musk did at Twitter, and make it a much better business, right? Suddenly you take that, enterprise software stock and you turn it into a bond that's like generating enormous free cash flow yield, right? In manufacturing, you don't have that playbook. If you take a small factory that destroys capital and scale it up into a giant factory that destroys capital, that's just a miserable business to own outright.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now I see it. Okay. Very interesting. Okay. Very cool. So broadly speaking, again, if we can look into the next, 5 to 10 years, given everything that's happening now in U.S. economy and overall manufacturing, so how do you see U.S. manufacturing in comparison to, even China manufacturing, and where do you think we will thrive, basically?
To be honest, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about that. I just think about the companies on our plate, the companies in our pipeline, the companies that we're building. I try to tune out a lot of geopolitical stuff, because for call it a seed to startup, Series B startup, which is the range from most of our companies are right now. If you all your time worrying about what's happening in China, you're going to miss the huge opportunity in front of you right now in North America and over time in Western Europe too. So I try not to worry too much about what China's doing. I do think there's a huge opportunity to build an American version of what China's doing in CNC. I agree with that. The post of that dude from that, I forget that company, whatever the company with the whatever they're doing at Robots in Space or something. He wrote something about that, and he's right. There's an opportunity to do that. That's not what you want to be doing as a pre-seed fund, because you're just gonna get the crap diluted out of you, and own a tiny amount of the business, right? That's for somebody like an Amazon to pull off. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to reshore some of that. But if you find yourself in a situation where you're competing against China, our company's competing against China and we win, but we win because instead of waiting 3 months, you get it in 3 days. Instead of waiting 2 months, you get it in 3 days. So we focus as much as we can on selling time, not just
Yeah.
product. Because time, how much would you pay if you could go to the drugstore and buy 3 weeks of time? You pay a lot.
Yeah, very true, very true. I think that's the biggest and most important measure, and that's the most compelling thing. Really, like from the logistic perspective, you just want to get something like overnight rather than waiting 3 weeks. And by the end of 3 weeks, you in some cases don't even know if you get the thing that you actually ordered.
Exactly.
This unpredictability is too much for some of the manufacturing things. So I think that's important, and that's where people should just be okay with paying some premiums on top of that, because again, you're getting something very quickly and probably with a high quality, and you also can just basically communicate with those people. And if you need to redo something, it's not going to take like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5. So time, I guess that's the
You're not
most.
putting your part design into the Chinese, industrial database.
This is true. This is true too.
Right?
So yeah, that's important, I think. Yeah.
Right? You think with what's that? You think with Sunpea your IP is safe? Do you think they care? No.
No, not at all, not at all. So yeah, I mean, a lot of the benefits to to do things within the country.
Yeah, I mean, I would love if, in addition to the tariffs that are going to be imposed on China, the Trump administration, impose some kind of a browser filter for the Chinese manufacturing services that said, notice, like, your IP will be taken and used against you to build competitive products, like warning. Just like the European Union has those really obnoxious nanny state, like, browser, cookie consent forms.
Yeah.
Have like a consent form for every, Chinese manufacturer that says, warning, your intellectual property is not secure. I think, reminders like this to folks, especially folks that are ordering parts in, national security, somewhat sensitive areas, even if it's on the edge, like, think twice. Think twice.
Yeah, I think it's totally okay, like, to order something like from the consumer perspective. Like, if you need something for fun for your like side product, okay, that's totally fine. But when you're thinking about like new products, critical components, like you just you just need to focus on the doing it locally. So that's
Yeah, and usually you're better off doing it faster anyway. So
exactly.
like if I think one way to compete against China is just with a fundamentally better service, better flows. But I welcome all the government support that this industry can get. I welcome all the support the government industry can get. Like, think about how heavily the internet was subsidized by sort of, by over all the decades by not just government investment in that infrastructure, but also foundational government research that led to the formation of the internet, right? Like, led to the adoption of the internet. So, I think there's been a lot more government investment in internet infrastructure than there has in manufacturing industry infrastructure. And, if we want to be more than a society of like phone-addled zombies, we want to become a society that makes things for ourselves, then, it would be wise if our public servants, mandate that investment.
I definitely want US to be less consumer society and more manufacturing society for sure.
Well, the two belong together. Think about all the one. I mean, every time I walk around our neighborhood in San Francisco and I see these old cars cruising around. Cars are made with steel, made with American steel. Iron ore that was mined in North Minnesota, shipped down the Great Lakes. Forged, turned into steel, forged parts. Right? Like the two can exist wonderfully together. And think about the world we live in right now, where everybody has the same, boring hybrid SUV crossover with like 5 or 6 different design variations and more or less the same portfolio of materials and composites inside of it.
Yeah, for sure. But again, I always thinking about that from the perspective like something like that label it made in the US, makes people proud. And I think that's important thing.
Yeah.
From the both like manufacturer perspective and consumer perspective as well. So
yeah.
Very cool. Okay, great. Thanks. Thank you so much, Matt. It was pleasure. It was awesome. Thanks for all the insights. So I'm happy to have another chat with you maybe in 6 months from now.
Yeah, thank you so much for, dedicating your career to building in this space, right? Like we need, I think American manufacturing it's imperative that we adopt a one team, one dream mentality, right? One team, one dream mentality. And, even while we're competing hard against each other, like we find ways to lift each other up the best we can. Because, we all win if we can pull this off. Uh, but so
100%.
happy
Totally agree.
time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man. Thank you.